You are listening to Severin Sorensen, Executive Coach and Curator of the Arete Coach Podcast, where we seek to explore excellence and the art and science of executive coaching today. I am speaking today with guest coach Larry Cassidy, who earned his MBA from the Kellogg School of Management from Northwestern. He retired also from the U.S. Marine Corps, where he had ranks of first, second lieutenant, and finished up in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserves, the title of the captain. After Marine Corps, Larry moved to Fortune 500, where he worked for some 20 years with General Mills, Quaker Oats, PepsiCo, and I learned today from Wilson Sporting Goods. So all very fun times. One of the things that Larry's done, he's also worked with startups. I found out that he has an interest in golf, and his handle on his email is handicapper. So I've got something to talk to Larry about outside of this call because I love to play golf as well. He's also been involved in corporate turnarounds. Now, his journey in coaching, coming through the military as well as years of experience in big business, led him to a path to be ready to become a coach or have an interest in a coach. So we will learn about his 34 years as a Vistage Chair. Now, Larry seems to be an overachiever, and you would understand that in several ways. First, in his career, he has over 14,000 paid executive coaching sessions. And once in Vistage, he decided to be the best he could be there. He has won over his years the STAR Award, the Chair Excellence Award, the Master Chair Award, the Regional Chair Award. He was named the 50 who made a difference in the first 50 years of Vistage. And most importantly, he was also named the Robert Nourse Chair of the Year Award and the Don Cope Award, which is the highest award that Vistage has. So we are talking today with a real rock star among executive coaches, and I am certainly looking forward to our conversational journey today. Now, Larry's path into coaching came through the military pathway, and we will explore how this helped set him up for his particular work efforts. And as we're talking about this, I want to explore what the difference is between battling the external forces and helping executives battle their own internal forces and voices they may have. As we begin, I want to share that Larry is passionate about the art and science of coaching, and he's contributed years of his life to the coaching profession. On disclosure, I first met Larry recently when he invited me to join his, get this, romper room for lifetime learners who are coaches. I, along with his colleagues, esteem Larry highly, and I thought speaking with him today would be a great addition to the Arete Coach Podcast that seeks to explore excellence and the art and science of coaching today. So welcome, Larry.
Good to be here.
Oh, I think this will be fun. So to get us started, I understand you've been coaching some 34 years. How did your feet take you into a life passion of coaching?
Well, I was CEO of a company in LA. I took it over around 7 million. And then we went to 12 million the next year. We went to 18 million the next year. And then I got fired because the Swiss owners wanted it to be 22 million. And we had a difference of opinion. And I learned that you don't win those battles with owners. So I was kind of hanging out there with a mortgage to pay. And I was in a tech group. I was a member. It was called Tech back then. I was a member. And there was a fellow in the group by the name of John Gallardi, who unfortunately passed away 7 or 8 years ago from cancer. John Gallardi started Wiener Schnitzel, which is a fast food chain pretty much out here in the western part of the country. And John said, I think you might be a pretty good tech chair. And I said, that's not for me. I'm a captain of industry. I've got to run something. That was late 86. And the next thing I knew, I was a chair walking into a group in January of 87.
Your journey, you've talked about the chairing part. Can I take you back to the early years? You had an experience in the Marine Corps. Tell me how that has helped your career.
I think the Marine Corps does a lot for you. You've probably seen that in your daughter who was a Marine. I've seen that in my daughter who was a Marine also. You get an enormous amount of responsibility really early in your career you're a 22, 23, 24-year-old second lieutenant, first lieutenant, in charge of 39 guys who could go into battle, or you're part of the planning mechanism for a battalion or a regiment. In most cases, we don't get that level of responsibility for years after we get out of the military. But it's not an optional dive. You have the responsibility, and then you've got to do the job. And it isn't just the Marine Corps. I mean, my hat's off to all of the services now. It's about, the bottom line, Sev, it's about doing your duty. And you don't always like your duty. You don't always, in business, you don't always like your assignment. You don't always like your job. You don't always like your boss. But in the Marine Corps, the colonel I worked for told me when I reported in, Lieutenant, it's the mission of the mission of the mission. You complete the mission. It sets you up to understand that you can do more than you thought you could do. And where that might have played a role in my career as a Vistage Chair is I went rolling into that first meeting. I'd been a member, but I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I had never been a coach before. Well, I probably had been a coach before as a CEO and a manager coaching, but I never thought about it that way. And I walked into a room full of accomplished executives, and I had to lead it. I had to figure it out, and I had about 5 minutes to figure it out. And there was a lot of that in the Marine Corps. So in a way, it wasn't new. But I think the Marine Corps and Vistage are similar in that they're both roles where you're serving. In the Marine Corps, you're serving your country, and you're serving the Corps, and you're taking care of your men. And in Vistage, you're serving business leaders, and in a sense, you take care of your men. In the Marine Corps, you don't leave your people behind. And as a Vistage coach and chair, you don't leave your people behind.
So I was also thinking, you just said earlier, the mission. That reminds me of Peter Drucker's work, Eat the Biggest Frog First. You don't avoid what has to get done, do it, and make sure that that's an important priority. So that's another thing I kind of take away from your comment there. Now, managing Marines, where people, once they're enlisted, they kind of have to be there. That's a challenge when we are now out in the corporate world and we're working with people who don't have to be there. They can fire us. We can do other things. So my question is this: what did you learn in managing Marines that you had to unlearn in managing executives?
Well, I was an officer in the Marine Corps back when if the officer said jump, you said how high. And so the troops in the platoon, the difference in the Marine Corps today and then is probably that a third to a half of my platoon was given a choice of being in the Marine Corps or going to jail by some judge somewhere. Today, you've got to be a pretty sharp cookie to get into the Marine Corps. But it was a command and control situation, much more. I mean, business was, most everything was back then. We're talking about end of the 50s and early mid 60s. I had to kind of unlearn a bunch of command and control as a coach. That's not my job as a coach, is to command and control my clients or my members. And my job as a coach is to get them to figure out the answer to their issues. They'll be much more enthusiastic about their answer than they ever will be about mine.
That's something very important that you said there, that we're not directing them. We are encouraging them, pulling them out, trying to help them self-discover those areas where they can be better. And that's so different than this dictatorial type management style.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Now, your career, you next went to the private sector. And two things. For first, any service people who are listening to this, they want to know, well, how did you make that break? You got a great career today. How did it happen that you went from the Marine Corps into the sector of big business? What did you learn? What advice might you give others getting out?
I would look back and and say that leaving the Marine Corps was a mistake. I was impatient. I think about when I was in the Marine Corps, and I had a lot of friends that were making their way in business and earning bigger and bigger bucks, and I was impatient. And the people I worked for in the Marine Corps put a lot of energy into trying to talk me out of leaving. But when it was clear I was going to leave, because I was a bit bullheaded back then, Colonel Webb told me, okay, you're not just going out to look for a job, you're going to go to graduate school. And I said, what's graduate school? And he explained to me, and I applied to, I think, Stanford, Harvard, and Northwestern, and I got in to all three, and I went to Northwestern because it had a one-year program. You could go in at the beginning of summer and graduate the next summer, and they gave you credit for previous business experience. And so they gave me credit for my Marine Corps experience. So I still wanted to get out and make some money. I actually don't believe it was a mistake. I don't think you make mistakes in your life. I think you do at any point in time what you think is the best thing you can do for yourself. And I wouldn't change anything. But I've always wondered if I'd stayed in the Marine Corps and I'd lived through Vietnam, what that might have meant.
Now, you went to grad school, and I think that's really an important component of the story here is getting an education at pivot points or a certification, of course, can often be helpful. At what point did you actually decide intentionally, I want to be a coach? And was there a defining moment where you decided to make that switch? And once decided, what did you do? How did you prepare yourself to be this coach?
When I did become intrigued with being a Vistage Chair, it was a tech chair back then, I never thought of it as becoming a coach. Back in those days, less so today, but back in those days, it was all about facilitating. You were facilitating the process. It only occurred to me a few decades later that nobody had ever called me a facilitator. They've always called me a coach, so I guess I was a coach. And coaching kind of came with the new experience. For those people that aren't familiar with Vistage, we have group meetings every month, one meeting a month with the group of CEOs, 10, 12, 15. But then the chair meets with them in between the monthly meetings for an hour and a half or 2-hour coaching session, which we call a one-to-one. That's kind of where I woke up to the fact that was probably the favorite part of my chair experience, was the one-to-one. Because you coach, Severin, you in a one-to-one, why do they call it a one-to-one? Because it's one-to-one. You can really get into stuff with a person. That's one of the things that's kept me going for over 3 decades doing this.
As you have gone through, and I know Vistage has a variety of different training programs. Certainly, I went through lots of the different schools. Were there any of the, we'll call acumen or skill sets that you have found are real go-to things that were important for you then or today in terms of your tool bag?
Well, you ask a old beat-up chair like me a question like that, and we're all going to laugh because in the more recent years, let's say the last 20 years, Vistage has refined and developed, I think, some terrific onboarding and wonderful training. But when I came aboard, my training was I got to attend a half-a-day meeting. I got to go with the chair to a couple of one-to-ones, and he let me off at the curb by my car afterwards and said, good luck. So that was kind of my training. It was a lot of figuring it out on your own, which takes me back to what I said about the Marine Corps. There was a lot of, get it done, Lieutenant. What wasn't the colonel's job to tell you how to do it? It was your job to get it done.
Well, thankfully, there has been much read, much examined and pondered to help us be more successful today in what we're doing. And so I share your same desire that there's training out there. I'm going to want to get it to keep my sword sharp, so to speak. So can you tell me what your coaching practice looks like today? And what would your ideal coaching practice look like in the future?
That's a great question. I At one time, I had 5 groups in Vistage. 3 of them were chief exec groups, 2 of them were key exec groups. So at the peak, for quite some time, I would have 75 to sometimes even 80 of those one-to-ones a month. What my practice looked like then was just too busy. I mean, it was almost exhausting. I gave up a chief exec group back in 2015, opened up some white space. I'm a little older now and didn't want to work quite as hard. And so I have 30 of those one-to-ones a month, which is just about right. There are times where I'll have as many as 3 or 4 independent coaching clients. I've got a couple now. And that kind of takes me to what it might look like in the future. I'd like to keep doing the Vistage thing for a while. I've got great relationships with 30 folks out there, plus another 15 key executives. But I can imagine when I'm no longer a Vistage Chair, having a small independent coaching practice, 6, 8, 10 clients a month. That would be called semi-retired, I think, something like that.
So let me ask you a different question. Looking back on your journey as a coach, what is the lesson you've learned recently that you wish you had learned earlier on?
Ask even more questions and shut up.
Tell me why that's so important to you.
Well, first, you don't learn anything when you're talking. Not that some of the things you have to say to your clients or your members aren't important. And if I'm going to give advice, particularly something with an edge on it, I'll often ask for permission. I'll say, Sev, you open for some input? And of course, they always say yes. And then when you've got permission, you can do it. But you don't find out what's really going on if you stop the questioning after 2 or 3 questions. The real deal is down there somewhere. And we are extraordinarily competent at hiding it. But if you don't get to it, then you don't unwind the problem. And my experience, and it applies to me as much as anybody else, is that when you get somebody to say to you, just spit it out and say to you, this is what scares me. Because that's really what's going on. When we don't do something that's obvious, we're afraid of something. When you finally get them to spit it out and say it, which takes generally a lot of questioning, it ain't so big. It's not the boogeyman that they thought it was. It's never been the boogeyman I thought it was. Oh, that's the problem? Okay, what can we do about that? And game on. But you don't get game on unless you get to it. So more questions, less prescription.
Love that. Let's dig deeper. So you mentioned questions are an important part of your coaching practice. Can you share with me some of the most powerful questions you've ever asked?
And that's a great question. My go-to favorite question is some version of, so Severin, it's December of 2020. What has to happen by next December 2021? What's the picture you have in your mind? What does it look like? If you're kicking some tail and doing good, life's not perfect, but you're really doing good, what does that puppy look like? I have never had a client or a member who couldn't answer that question. And once their eyes will go up and they'll start picturing and talking about it, and they'll get excited. And okay, now we got something to work with. You haven't asked me, but if you were to ask me, what is the single most important idea, maybe other than asking questions, what is the single most important idea you've ever heard that affected your coaching? It's Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Begin with the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind. So it's some versions of how do you want this to end? What does this look like? What has to happen? And if you can get them to tell you in their words, not yours, now you can say, okay, let's subtract where we are now from where you have to be. Oh, we've got a gap. What do we need to do to fill the gap? And it becomes manageable. It's not the boogeyman that they thought it was.
I love to ask future-based questions and have them look and be introspective about where they want to go and take the gap out of becoming and where they want to be. It's wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions you've asked? Something that changed the world for one of your clients?
You know, the answer to that might be something you wouldn't expect. It isn't a specific thing. It's the number of times that members have said to me, or they've spoken up in one of our group meetings, or chairs at a Chair World conference have come to me and said something that sounds like, you know, in 2002, we were talking and you said da-da-da-da-da, and it changed my life. I can't even remember 2002, let alone what I said to him in 2002. And there's a lesson in there. And that is, if you're a coach, if you're somebody that's looked up to, and isn't just a coach, if you're a parent, you're a grandparent, you're a CEO, you're somebody in a leadership capacity, everything you say matters. You don't have to be a grunge, you don't have to be overly serious, but everything you say matters. It's going to affect somebody in some way. And you need to think about that before you open your mouth.
Now it's powerful. So do you have a why?
Yeah.
What's your why?
Many years ago, a member of mine who ended up, we've spent 25 years together, and I still sit in on the board of one of his companies a couple times a year, gave me a book. And in the book, he said that he believed that his mission in life was to become the best possible version of himself. And that, along with Covey's Begin with the End in Mind, will be the second most impactful thing that, you know, really kind of whacked me. And that changed my focus as a Vistage Chair and as a coach and as a person. Not that I look back and say that I wasn't trying to do that, but I wasn't intentional about it. And that's my why today. I tell the people I work with, you come into Vistage or you hire me because you think you want to run your business better, and you do, and we'll work on that, and you will. Vistage members tend to do, frankly, far better than the average member out there in terms of performance. But the real reason you should be in a group like this, and the real reason we should work together, is that you want to become the best version of yourself. Because if you can pull that off, the impact on everybody in your life is profound. But you got to work. You got to work hard at it. And you got to be willing to, you know, you got to be willing to put it out there with the bark on. You can't be just smoothing everything off. You've got to be willing to play if you're going to become a better version of yourself.
Putting it out there with the bark on. I don't think I've heard that expression. Tell me more about that expression.
That's what Lieutenant Colonel told me he wanted. Colonel Webb told me he wanted from me when I reported in. He said, Lieutenant, I want it with the bark on. I don't want you to smooth it off. You know, he wanted it all. He was a big boy. He could sort through it. He didn't need me to kind of sneak around what was going on.
Can you share with me your best day ever as a coach? Why was it your best day? What made it so great?
I'm a lucky guy. I've had a lot of best days. And I think what they have in common, whether I'm looking down the table at a group meeting back when we could get together, or I'm looking at the screen on a Zoom meeting, which is how we're doing it now, or I'm looking at you in a one-to-one across the table or desk, and I'm seeing somebody who couldn't do a year or 2 or 3 years ago what they're doing now. And I see them doing it, and I know that some of that has come from being in the group, the support of the members, are working together, that they've somehow in the process found, really what it really boils down to, Sev, is the courage. They found the courage to do what's difficult. I'm a believer that people do what they need to do when the pain of doing it becomes less than the pain of not doing it. And the group or the coaching or something has gotten them across that line, and they're willing to do something that's frightening. And they always say the same thing. I'm sure they say the same thing to you: is why didn't I do it earlier? Oh my God, I feel so good now, right?
Can you share with me an experience where you've taken somebody to the pain? And again, here, keeping confidence, no names, but share with me the coaching process where somebody has been impacted and made that change.
So I could pick out of the masses. I've got a fellow I've worked with for 18 years. He left the group for a year after they had to terminate a whole management team, and he had to jump back in, but he came back into the group. When he first came into the group, he was immature, kind of a playboy, good guy, smart, worked hard. But I was talking with him a couple months ago and looking at him and thinking, it's really amazing. He couldn't terminate anybody back then because he was friends with everybody in the company, which is deadly. Not that you don't want to have good relationships, but now he can make the tough decisions. Now he can ask for and require accountability. He can do a number of things that you're probably sitting there thinking, well, that's pretty basic. But there's a lot of people out there that have trouble doing pretty basic things. I had trouble doing a few basic things when I was a CEO, and I look back. It's not easy moving from being one of the boys to where you're the boss, and you got to make the tough calls. He can do that now. And he would, if he was in this, we were having a three-way here, he would tell you that the time in Vistage really has helped him. Not just his and my relationship. He's heard speakers. He's been in a room with other smart, capable people that have gotten a lot done. Yeah, he's a different person today, and everybody in the group knows it. They see it in him. They comment on it. You know what it's really like? You're a papa, so you'll get this. It's the same process by which a mature mother or father moves from getting their thrills from their accomplishments to getting their thrills watching their kids accomplish things. At my age, I get my wins watching the people I work with win, become better version of themselves. 40 years ago, it was all about, hanging pelts on the wall. Now it's about watching people you work with do good.
We've talked about questions as a tool. Do you have any other coaching tools that are your favorites in your quiver that you pull out from time to time to help in the coaching experience? If so, what are they?
Well, the what does it look like is a big one. There's some basic ones that I'm sure you ask, like, so if you did that, Severin, what would be the worst thing that could happen? Usually there's not much of a worst thing that can happen. when you start talking about it. I asked my key group several days ago, and I'll talk next week with each of my chief exec groups. I'll send them off into breakout rooms to talk with each other with 3 questions. Who are you? What do you really want? And what price are you willing to pay for it? Pretty good questions to ask at the end of a year and before you head into the next year. I mean, we have business questions because they are running a business and they want to run their business better. So there's obviously business questions that relate to their business. We have always a bunch of those. But I try to sprinkle into the one-to-ones and into the group meetings at least some part of the process about where are you going? What do you really want? What do you have to do to get there? And what price are you willing to pay? You don't get anything, no matter what choice you make. You don't get anything without paying a price. I was on before I talked to you today with somebody who said, one of the things I ask, as you know, is what's the gift that you got from COVID this year? What's the gift or a couple of gifts that you got from coronavirus? And this fellow was telling me, phenomenal increase in the relationship with my kids and my wife. I'm home more, and I said, Mark, what price are you willing to pay to keep that going? And by the way, where he came out was, I got to continue getting better and better people working for me because that's how I get more free time.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
No, and that is a great question. Your COVID question is a great question. For someone looking to get into the coaching field today, what would be your advice to them on how to get into the field?
One of the kind of rules that I try to follow is to not be judgmental. I wasn't put on earth to judge people. I think there's a difference between judging and being discriminating. I have to be discriminating, and I say that only because what I'm going to say now is going to sound judgmental, but I don't know how, as smart as they are, a graduate comes out of the Wharton School of Business or the Northwestern School of Business and can go off and coach people on how to run a business or how to live their life. So I think that the precursor to helping people do something is to have had some experience yourself in doing it. I don't think I could have been as effective as a Vistage coach without all of the things that came before. I might not have had to spend as much time doing it, but I think you need the exposure. When I became a Vistage Chair, one of the reasons that I was accepted quickly by the members, because I took over a group that had been chaired by another fellow, is I'd sat in their seat. I had to make payroll. I had to do all the things they had to do.
We've talked so far about success. Can you tell me an important failure that you've had in coaching that taught you something that has been a treasure and a jewel for you ever since in terms of the learning that came from it?
Yeah, the learning came actually kind of simultaneously between a member and myself. There was another member in that group who over the course of a year plus was really struggling with the difference between ending up with his own business and all the risk associated with that versus running a business for somebody and having a cut of the action. So you have a little piece of entrepreneurship, but you're a hired gun. Okay. And that discussion went on within the group. I probably let it go on far too long, but it was really important and very emotional at times. And finally, one day I had a one-to-one with this other member and named Don. And Don looked at me and he said, we've really made a mistake. I said, well, how's that? And he said, well, I know I've made a mistake because I'm an entrepreneur. And I've been pushing Chris all year long. Take the jump, man. Become an entrepreneur. That's the way to go. And he said, what I wasn't realizing is it's not my job to tell Chris what to do or to be like me. It's my job to understand Chris and his capability and then help him become the best he can be given who he is. And I went, yeah, thanks for the education, Don. I'm the coach. I should have figured that out long before now. He was dead right. And I think about that a lot. And we stop meetings at times and I remind everybody, hey, this is about where is Severin and what can he do? And let's help him get the most out of that right now. And maybe next year he'll be able to do more. You know, I have laying next year to me these 11 Marine Corps leadership principles. And the last one, which was also the 7th troop leading step, was employ your unit in accordance with its limitations and capabilities. Don't send a platoon to do a battalion's job. You know, I'm not talking about when you have no choice, when you're trapped. I'm just saying, understand your people, understand your systems, understand who you are at any point in time, and get everything you can out of it. Tomorrow will be another day. But don't ask people to do what they can't do unless it's an absolute crisis, and there aren't very many of those.
Well, it goes into not just don't ask, but don't direct somebody else's goal.
Yeah. What did Henry Ford say? Nobody is as ambivalent as one who is in pursuit of another person's goal.
So true. I learned this when my children were age 8. I loved baseball growing up, and I wanted to be a professional baseball player. And I kind of got phased out with a junior college offer, and I decided that baseball was not going to be it. But I always had this thought that I would coach my sons playing baseball. And then one day I had twin boys, and it was time for baseball, and I signed up to be the baseball coach, had all the bat and the gear, and I was living my dream. I got there, and I noticed my sons had no interest in baseball. We were at the tryouts, recruiting other players. And I looked at my sons, and I looked at this, and I said, what do you guys think? And I go, what do you really want to do? We want to play soccer, Dad. I said, that's it. I walked over. I apologized to the organizer. I handed the entire kit. I said, this was about my dream. It's now about my children's dream. And I learned that, fortunately, when they were at a very early age. And ever since, it's not been about what I want. It's like, what is your highest hope? What is your potential? And how can I help you raise your sights and abilities to get there? And that seems to be all coaching is. It's just a higher form of parenting, if you will, helping other people achieve their best. Those experience can be a dear teacher, especially as we bounce off the walls, figuring out what to do. Bouncing off the walls brings up a topic for me. You organized a group called the Romper Room. For all of the adults in the room, we're not talking about the children's romper room. Tell me what your thoughts were in organizing a romper room. What do you do there?
Well, one of my thoughts was if I called it a chair meeting, nobody would come. But if I called it something crazy like a romper room, everybody'd want to come see what it was about. So we have about 40 people. We generally get, I think you were in the first one this last time, it was like 27, 28. And they're all over the country. And I'm asking myself, why shouldn't they be all over the world? But there are time zone issues with that. This was a kind of the early days of coronavirus lockdown. And I thought, you know, I'm talking with my members about connectivity. They're, you know, in late March, April, May, people were frightened. We forget that. Oh my God, what's gonna happen? You know, there was no PPP yet. Everybody's worried if they were going to survive. Am I going to have a job? I thought, well, why wouldn't we chairs be equally concerned? We need somebody to talk to. So I just thought I'd get a bunch of chairs together all over the country, and we'd say, hi, how's it going? What are you doing? What have you figured out? And You saw the results of one of it. I'll let you comment. What do you think of it?
I think it is absolutely critical for professionals, individuals to have a place where they can be safe, have voice, bounce ideas off, and find nurturing from friends and colleagues who will speak straight to them. And one of the things that's so awesome about your romper room is every person in there to a person is awesome. So
Right.
it's a curated group of hand-selected people who are the best of the best in their field. And when people talk, you just listen. It's like the old, commercial, when Hutton speaks, everybody quiets up because they're about to hear pearls of wisdom. So
Yeah.
I think it's valuable, but for anybody listening, I think it's essential that you form or find a peer group for yourself as a professional to work in. So coaches should have coaches. Coaches should have their own peer groups because it will help your craft. It will help your work as you learn, as you practice coaching, practice role playing, do a whole bunch of other things. So to me, it's exciting. I just thought it was clever what you did, and I was amazed at the quality of people. I clearly was the underdog of the group, so I was happy that you would let me in. But there were some amazing people there. It was kind of fun.
And they keep coming back, which, um, I mean, you mentioned some awards at the beginning. If you were to ask me what is the most meaningful award that you've gotten in 34 years, right now it's my 30-year acrylic. It's not any of those other awards. Those are
The
great.
Endurance Award.
Because you don't get a 30-year award unless people keep coming back. I mean, the 30-year award is given to you by your members and your clients, by butts in the seats. That's what you want in any business with your customers. You want them to keep coming
Yeah.
back, right? One of the ways that they keep coming back, and this is a lesson that applies not only to our conversation, but to any company and the quality of people they have, is there's other people in the room that they want to come back and be with. It's not just the coach or the Vistage Chair. It's a group of people that are worth being with, that are like what you described, which is, oh my gosh, almost anybody around the table opens their mouth, they're worth listening to.
It's part of the magic. Was wondering, do you have a particular type of executive or CEO or person that you feel you work best with? And are there some that you just don't work well with? You've learned over time that's not the person I coach.
I like people that are learners. I want inquisitive people who want to learn. Because if you want to learn, you'll check your guns at the door. You can pick your guns up on the way out of the bar, but if you're going to come in, you check your opinions at the door and you learn. And you're welcome to throw everything away when you walk out the door, but you're there to learn. So that's the kind of person I want. I've learned that I'm not naturally aware of the impact I have on people. And so I'm a pretty straightforward person. I don't think I'm tactless, but I know I could be a little more thoughtful at times. I don't think I'm thoughtless, but I think I could be a little more thoughtful. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether you're thoughtless or you're not thoughtful. It lands on the person pretty much the same way. So, but also I don't think I understand when I'm having, a positive impact on people. I'm probably not saying this well, Severin, and I don't know if you have an experience that's anything like this, but I'm not seeing myself as Mahatma Gandhi or something like that. I have a job to do, and it's just go spend an hour and a half with you and talk about things that make you a better version of Sev, and therefore make you more capable as a leader in everything you do in your life. And I know there's chairs that talk about, we're changing the world. I don't know if I'm changing the world. I would settle for helping to promote a small change in you that would make you a better person. And you have to choose to do that. It's not my job to make you do it, even tell you to do it. It's my job to intrigue you.
How has your understanding of coaching changed over time?
I think the changes in my understanding of coaching are really changes in my understanding of me and what I need to not do and what I need to do more of. And, and that's just all experience. I mean, if we do something over a period of time and we don't get better at it, shame on us.
How will you measure your life?
Oh my God, what a question. I actually think about that a little more because I'm not a spring chicken anymore. So if you're standing in the activity room of the church after my memorial service with those terrible little dry cookies and tasteless punch and talking to people and somebody said, what would you say about Larry Cassidy? And you said, I'm just a little bit better for having had him in my life. That would be good enough for me.
Good is good enough. We are enough. And you have impacted many, many people. So I appreciate your humility. And I hope that those that are watching or listening understand that as you speak plainly, as you talk like a human being, as you downplay your own greatness and talk about how you have helped people in subtle ways, we can be great if we lift others. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk with you today. So I'd like to close with a question for you. What's the question I haven't asked you that would tell me much more about you?
Well, I think you kind of asked it, and we probably could have spent the entire time on it because we've all had either failures or things we'd like to do differently if we could go back and redo them. But we actually don't want to go back and redo anything because if we did, we wouldn't be where we are today. So you kind of got to accept the results of your screw ups because those are the times that we've got to get back up and dust ourselves off and get back on the horse and try again. And I've always thought to myself, why have you had the success you've had? And it's really come down, not the intellect, not the coaching skills. It just, it's what got me through cancer 12 years ago is I just don't give up. I just don't give up.
12 years is a long time ago. Cancer is something that many will go through. What is some advice you would give for people if you were coaching somebody who had just learned that they were having cancer and given a diagnosis that it would likely be terminal?
Yeah, mine was, it was prostate cancer. And when you say that, most people think, oh, well, that's not the worst kind of cancer to get. But in my particular case, it was really touch and go. The best advice I got from a fellow chair, a lady who had survived breast cancer. And she said to me, it was one of the two best pieces of advice. She said to me, don't be angry. Don't be angry at cancer. Don't be angry that you've got cancer. You need all your energy to get through this. You don't want to pee it away on being upset. I think that's probably pretty good advice for CEOs and business executives. Don't be angry. So your client or your competitor brought out a product faster than you. Angry doesn't help. Go do something about it. Right? And then the other piece of advice I got actually was the second one. I was having dinner shortly after I found out what was really going on up at a yacht club here in LA. And the people I was having dinner with introduced me to a speaker. I think it was Jerry Cornfield, doctor. And they brought him over to the table and we chatted for a while. And he said, I've been a surgeon for over 40 years. And he said, I know that the work I've done has saved some lives. He said, but I also know that there have been a lot of people on the operating table and I've done the best job I could. And they survived. And I know that it wasn't me. And he said, what I've learned in 40 years is a lot of times it just boils down to the attitude of the patient. That's what gets them through. There are just people that aren't going to give up. They're just one way or another going to make it. So I went in to see my cancer doc 3 months after the treatment was over for my first reading. And you're familiar, the guys watching this will understand PSA. We all get to do that. And it was minuscule, almost unmeasurable. And I just broke down and cried, and I said to the doctor, he was sitting on a stool, a little Japanese fellow sitting on a stool, and he kind of scooted his stool over and he put his arm around my shoulder and said, it's okay. All my patients do this, and I said, my only regret is I wasn't strong enough to get through this without collapsing, because I didn't want to quit. I wanted to go right to the end, do all my meetings, do all my one-to-ones. If I was on my feet moving, I was winning, right? And he said to me, he says, Larry, there's nobody who is strong enough to go through what we did to you. Nobody. He said, but I've never had anybody that had a stronger willpower than you. And he says, there's a difference between having a strong will and being strong physically. And I thought that was a great lesson. Who you really are is written in the times things don't work out. We always like to talk about all the great stuff we've done, but it really comes down to how do you handle the adversity. F. Scott Peck and his book, first line in his book, life is tough. That's the first sentence in The Road Less Traveled. Life is tough.
Well, and we have several themes that came out here today. And for those who've been listening, first off, I want to thank Larry for his insights. I hope you share with me after listening that we're listening to a wise person who also is very authentic and has learned so many things. So I took the liberty of writing some notes down. I want to share with you what I heard through this. One of the first things that you said in here that struck me, and I put this right at the top of the page, everything we say matters. Every word, every written email, everything we say matters. As leaders, we really need to understand our communication and bridle those thoughts that ought not to be said. Maybe you go to your Vistage group and say them. Talk to your coach and get them out. But everything matters. Even words suddenly that you thought were out there, people will come back to you later on and say. So really be introspective about our language and how we do things. So I thought that was precious what you said. Another thing you put there is one of your greatest changes or learning was basically your own understanding of yourself, this notion of knowing yourself. That sometimes in this journey, what we learn about and who we save is ourselves. And I thought that was very sage. You talked about your job, your ability, and so on. You gave some of your favorite questions. I had your 1, 2, 3. The who are you, the what do you really want, and what price you're willing to pay for it. I think calculating the price so valuable. Just so many other concepts here that I just thought were wonderful. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to go back over and hear this and edit. And my hope is to create something that is a treasure for not only you and your family, but for all the people who have worked with you, because you, not only are you enough, you are a wonderful, authentic person. So thank you so much for that today. I've been speaking today with guest coach Larry Cassidy. He's a decorated veteran Vistage Chair and executive coach. He comes to coaching by way of the U.S. Marine Corps and then 20 years in corporate America. He's had 34 years now as a chair, and you can learn more about him and the many different things he's done. If you choose to research him, his email is handicapper@gmail.com. I'll put it on the screen. It's HNDICAPPER@gmail.com. It is poignant that our conversation today directed into the very quotes that I picked for this session. With each session of the podcast, I end with a quote. Today, I end with two. And the first one comes from Scott Peck, the very one Larry mentioned in his writing. Scott pens, "Evil people hate the light because it reveals themselves to themselves. They hate goodness because it reveals their badness." Contrast that with the sage words of Aristotle, who wrote long ago, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." Sometimes our jobs as coaches is to shed light on those aspects of our clients' behaviors, actions, and intentions that are holding them back. Helping them access what they might already know but are not expressing is our job. We become, in a way, a self-reflecting mirror for our clients. Our aim as coaches is captured in the ICF definition of what coaching is. Coaching is partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. When coaching is best served, we co-partner with our clients in the coaching narrative, drawing them out and enlarging their self-knowledge and awareness. Through powerful questioning, silence, and introspection, we encourage thought, pondering, awakening, as we intentionally allow and encourage our clients to choose what happens next in their lives and what happens next in their coaching session. We ask for permission from our clients to ask the hard questions, and we seek to go deeper inside to help unlock in them their greatest potentials and inner wisdom. This is the exciting bit of coaching to me, to help others really come to know themselves and reach their higher state of awareness, performance, and wisdom. Surely this is what we talked about with Larry today, getting to know the real person, asking them the hard questions, asking for permission to go deeper. And I think it's part of the wisdom for this session of our podcast. So until next time, I invite you all to be your best self, seek to uplift others, be good, and do good. You have been listening to the Arete Coach Podcast, where we seek to explore coaching and the art and science of this wonderful field that we've come to love so much.